Hey ding-dongs, I'm Jamie.
I'm Richard.
And this is Explain It to Jamie. You heard correct. We're back. I am Jamie, a curious young man from Toronto who is politically innocent and wants to be violated by my friend Richard, who is politically savvy.
Wow, it's like we haven't missed a beat, Jamie.
Yeah.
Back in the saddle, and it's like we never left.
Well, I stumbled over saying young man because I am now a 30-year-old beast.
That's right.
Who should know better, but still doesn't.
That's right. A lot can change in 11 months, everybody.
Yeah.
Jamie and I both turned the dial in a new decade in our lives. That's right. We're 30.
30 years old, making investments.
Yep.
Like, I don't know, regretting things.
We're attending physiotherapy regularly for all the strange maladies our bodies have developed.
Yeah.
We're thinking about new mattresses. Like these are.
I just got a new mattress.
You just got a new
and
mattress.
I'm thinking about my next one.
I've been researching a new mattress, actually.
We're back, guys. We're back. I know it's been a while. But hey, good to see you too.
Yeah.
Why be so fucking rude about it?
yeah. Let's not go around pointing fingers at who took an 11-month break and who said they were going to be back in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we're busy people. I, as I've mentioned, am politically innocent, and last year I feel like I was exposed to so much politics that I have literally looked under the cloak of death herself, and I needed to sleep for 10 months.
Jamie was like one of those people who looked directly at the eclipse last year, and like there's a permanent burn on his retinas that's shaped like Jeff Sessions' face.
Hey, speaking of looking at the eclipse,
yeah,
I need something explained to me this weekend.
What's that, Jamie?
Richard, Donald Trump.
Okay.
Our last episode on Donald Trump, if you'll remember, was who has been fired from the Donald Trump White House recently.
Right.
Oh, remember those days,
It was
Richard?
a heady days.
Yeah.
They were innocent days.
Oh my God, how we pranced fancy-free.
Do you remember when we were like innocently following the soap opera? I mean, it was always infuriating and sort of a macabre nightmare parade.
Yeah.
But back in the day, it was kind of like, oh, there's these wacky characters like Scaramucci. You remember Scaramucci?
Yeah.
Remember when that was the dude we had to care about? Nowadays, you open the paper and it's like there's a coiled up boxing glove on a spring that just punches you directly in your soul.
And which is what brings us to hopefully a hopeful note, which is the midterm elections.
Yeah.
Rico,
I have bad news for you. Yes, we're talking today about the American midterm elections, which, due to the power of future sound tricks, should be happening the week that this releases.
Wow, future sound tricks.
Yeah.
That sounds so futury and tricky.
Wow.
Anyway, what say we hop back into this theme song?
I think that we should spool it up for old time's sake.
Roll it, motherfucker! Wow, what a soundtrack.
Sure tugs on the old heartstrings, doesn't it?
My God, it's nice, but
Wow.
you know what? Change is here,
Yeah.
and I think we should make a new one.
Yeah, I wouldn't be crushed if somewhere along the line the theme song got revamped at some point.
Yeah. Okay, so how about we, hop into the midterm elections?
All right, Jamie, what do you know about American midterm elections?
Richard, let me tell you this. Okay, I know... First of all, I forgot about this bit that we do. And second, but what I do know is that, about a year and a bit ago, the whole country of the United States suffered a massive brain spasm,
right,
and accidentally elected a goblin cheese puff to be its ruler.
Right.
We've had some problems along the way, some missteps, but here we are, our opportunity, America's opportunity to fix the thing they broke and to right the world back into place. Am I correct? This is that moment.
It's like the sad version of it. I think that what you're expressing is like the hope and dream of many people.
Right.
The truth is that, this is planet Earth in 2018, it's a never-ending nightmare hellscape of all of our darkest horrors being made real all the time.
I have noticed.
So while there is some hope on the horizon for the midterm elections, this is the real world, and there's a good chance things are going to get worse before they get better.
But how is this possible, Richard? Everybody seems to disagree with Donald Trump. Everybody, the outcrying consensus seems to be, oops, we oh no, what have we done? And how is it possible that it continues? I mean, I guess these midterm elections, they're not for the presidency?
That's correct.
They're for the Congress.
Yeah,
right?
So let's talk a bit. That's a great question. How is it possible that we're not just going to, go whoops and then shoot Donald Trump out of a huge catapult into a volcano?
Yeah.
Well, what's on the docket for the midterm elections is, the midterm elections happen on November 6th.
Okay. Get out to vote.
Yeah, get out to vote, everybody. And what's on the docket is all of Congress. So the Congress is all getting reelected because Congress only sits for 2-year terms. That's part of the deal.
Congress being the act between a man and a woman to
That's right.
Enact the
That's
legal
right.
binding
And
of
this
marriage.
year, America votes on what parts of all of the foreplay and post-coital talk will be included in the official American intercourse for the next 2 years. Yeah. Is cunnilingus going to make it in? It's looking a little bit hairy.
Not in Ontario.
Too real.
Yeah.
Okay. So every seat in Congress, all 538 of them, are up for re-election. And this is where the Democrats stand to actually make a lot of gains, and where hope could be. There's a good chance the Democrats could retake control of Congress, which would not be a terrible thing.
Right.
However, only 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election, and that's built into the way the system works. Congress people serve 2-year terms, which means that they get elected in the same year as the president, but then they have to get re-elected again halfway into the president's term, the midterm election. Right. But senators serve 6-year terms, so every 2 years, 1/3 of them get re-elected. So they kind of have a rolling system. So the
Senate never switches over.
Exactly. And they're supposed to have a little more longevity. Congress people are supposed to be really, really accountable to their vote to the voters, and so that's why they're up for election so frequently. And senators are supposed to be a little more protected from the voters. They're supposed to be able to be a bit more independent, do a bit more long-term planning, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
That's in the idealized form of things.
So okay, but let's say best case scenario.
Right.
Which I hesitate even to say this is a best case scenario. But let's say just it's an overwhelming smash by the Democrats, and we just get a whole bunch of Democratic Congress people.
Well, here is the situation. The situation is, in order for the Democrats to take over the House, they need to win 23 more seats than they have right now. There's a really good chance that they could do that, because right now there's actually 75 seats that are really close.
How many do they have right now?
The Democrats?
Yeah.
Total seats? Oh my God, they have 190 something.
Oh, okay.
1 sec.
Okay. So it's I guess I don't need exact numbers. I'm just looking for a percentage. So it's not like they have 10 and they need 23.
There's 538 seats in Congress.
That's a big table.
It is. And so the fact that 23 seats will flip the balance of power should tell you how close it is. Right. So there's 75 seats that are toss-ups, and 75 seats that are quite competitive. They're close. There's 30 seats right now that are totally 50-50, and of those 30, 28 of them are currently held by Republicans. So there's a really good chance that Democrats could make the gains that they need to make. It's historically speaking, the party that's not the president's party does well in the midterms, because people tend to get pissed off at the president and vote out the president's party.
Why would anybody get pissed off at Donald Trump?
I don't know. I mean, I think he's, I love hearing about him every day.
I can't watch you say that. I can't. It makes me feel sick.
A fucking spider came out of my mouth as I said that. It just walked across my face. So, but this goes all the way back to World War I, this precedent where the president gets elected, And then for 2 years, all the people who hate the president get really angry. And generally, the angry people are the ones who are more energized going into the midterms.
Right.
Midterms suffer from like brutally bad voter turnout usually because they're just not as sexy and exciting as the presidential races. Mm-hmm. So like the voter turnout for the 2012 presidential election was like 60%, and then the voter turnout for the 2014 midterm election was 37%, right? Like close to half of the people show up.
Right.
So generally speaking, the people who are pissed enough to show up are the people who are mad at the president. And almost always, like only twice in the 20th century ever did the president's party pick up seats at the midterm, and then only a couple. Right. Never a big swing.
So we have this thing, this like societal backlash that is a regular pattern where people go against the president, and Congress, the president's Congress, perceivably loses power, gains power, whatever it is, but they lose power. How does that hinder the president?
So it hinders him, and I mean, it's going to make him furious, and hasten, I'm sure, the already rapid degradation of his mental faculties into absolute mush. But also, with the Democrats in control of Congress, they gain control of the Robert Mueller special investigation into like ties with Russia because Congress is overseeing that investigation. They gain the ability to impeach the president, although it is incredibly unlikely that they will convict. That the president will get convicted of an impeachment.
Sure.
Remember, we have a whole episode on impeachment if you want to dip back into the archives for that to go through the technicalities of this. Basically,
that's one of those episodes that doesn't go bad.
Yeah, you can definitely check that one out.
Yeah.
But basically, Congress impeaches the president, which means they accuse him of doing something unpresidential.
Yeah.
And then the Senate is supposed to like have the trial and decide if it's true or not, and he should get kicked out of the presidency.
Right.
2 presidents have been impeached, but none have ever actually gotten even to the stage where the trial happened because they both resigned before that was the case.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. Can you imagine going through like a 3-year trial, like just like brutal grinding trial, just to
and it's worth saying that even though that's sort of a sexy, fun idea, impeachment of Donald Trump is not fully something that the Democrats have staked their campaign on,
right?
Which is a kind of a mixed. I feel mixed about it. I don't think it'll do anything, but I do think it will drive Donald Trump crazy. You know what I mean? Let's do it. Why not? However, the real problem is that, again, like I said, a third of the Senate is up for re-election, and unfortunately for the Democrats, it just so happens that this year, 26 Democratic seats are up for re-election and 9 Republican seats are up for re-election. Oof. So the Democrats have to re-win every single seat that they're still holding now and pick up 2 seats from the Republicans in order to tip the balance of power in the Senate, and that's hard. It's not totally impossible, but they just can't fuck up at all in order for it to happen.
Isn't that crazy though, Richard? Isn't that crazy though that even after this year we've had, even after all all this stuff that it would take, things have to go like perfectly to take 2 seats.
Well, one of the reasons that it's so difficult for them is I don't know if you remember this term, but with what was called the blue wall, which is like all of the typically Democratic states in the Midwest, like in the North, that were like more working class states that generally had a strong Democratic support presence that usually went to Barack Obama, but they didn't go to Hillary Clinton, right? They flipped for Donald Trump in this election. That was a big part of the upset that he pulled.
Right.
A lot of those seats are up for re-election. So these are sitting Democratic senators. 6 years ago, these Democrats were elected before Trump was the president, but now these states have since gone for Donald Trump. So these Democratic senators are sitting on seats that are now red states. So they're all vulnerable, right? These are people who generally, they don't like the Republican Party. They don't like Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan and all these other pieces of shit, but they love Donald Trump and the kind of outrage machine that he represents and the power that he makes them feel. Right. So the Democrats in these cases are faced with this really difficult political situation.
How many people in the United States do you think are want Donald Trump to keep being president purely for the reason that Stephen Colbert is really funny.
Definitely Stephen Colbert. I think.
Yeah.
Like definitely the network president. Network News has been having a fucking field day with the news cycle right now. It's just been crazy. It's like a war out there. There's a lot of people who I'm sure just are here for the circus and feel kind of protected from the actual chaos it'll cause.
Yeah.
And those people are terrible, and we should despise them.
Yeah, they're sort of like the entertainment industry version of ambulance chasers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I should take this moment to talk too about so another reason that this is going to be really hard for the Democrats is that Republicans control a lot of the state legislatures. So also up for re-election in all across the country are a bunch of governorships, who becomes the governor of a state, and the state legislature, who makes the laws in the state itself. And the problem is that a lot of state legislatures are Republican. Obama really ignored, the Democrats under Obama ignored state races and tried to concentrate all their energy into the presidency.
Right.
But they lost tons and tons of state legislatures, state senates, and governorships under Obama. And the result of this is that Republican states are making it unbelievably hard for Democratic voters to vote in that state. They're doing every single disgusting, underhanded, bullshit trick they can pull to try to stop Democrats from voting, and usually stop black people and minorities from voting. So there's many things happening here. The most offensive thing that has happened is in North Dakota, where just about, what day is it today? It's the 19th, I think, the 21st. So about 2 weeks ago, on October 9th, they passed a new voter ID law. So one of the main ways that you stop people from voting is voter ID laws. And what you do is you look at who holds what kinds of IDs in your state, because you have that data available to you, and then you take a look at what kind of IDs the people who don't vote for you have, and you make those IDs unusable for voting.
Right. So you have a hunting license. That's exactly. A perfect ID.
And in North Dakota, which is an important Democrat state because it's a really tight swing state, they recently made a change on October 9th that says that your ID has to have your residential street address on it, or it's not eligible to vote. And the issue here is that North Dakota has a lot of indigenous reservations, and they use PO boxes and don't have street addresses. And it's estimated that 5,000 indigenous people will not be able to vote in this election if they do not find a way to get a residential street address in the next 2 weeks. And they vote heavily Democrat, and last year the Democrat won by 3,000 votes. So the 5,000 people who can no longer vote actually make the balance. Right? That's a brutal example.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Oof.
In another example, Georgia's been having a brutal change to its voter ID laws. What's happened in Georgia is they made a change where if your voter registration doesn't exactly match the info from your ID with no typos of any kind, then it's put on pause. So your registration's frozen. It won't work until you sort it out, right? So 50,000 people, or 53,000 people just had their voter registration frozen in Georgia. 70% of them are black.
Wow. So wait, what sorry, say that again.
So so you have a voter registration, and then you have your ID.
Right.
They're two separate things. And if there's any discrepancy between any of the information on your voter registration and your ID, including a missed hyphen in your last name, a typo, your registration gets frozen. And for some reason, this obviously massively disproportionately affected black people who massively vote Democrat in Georgia.
Oof.
Also in Georgia.
When I was in London and I was coming home in the airport, for whatever reason, on my ticket home, my name had been spelt wrong. And I don't think I did, but maybe I did.
Yeah.
It was spelt wrong.
Yeah.
And it cost me $180.
Yes.
To get let on the airplane. I was what just happened? You just took...
You made a typo.
Yeah, you made a typo, and I just lost $180.
Yeah, it's that, but for all of society.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also less subtle things too. In Georgia, just last week, there was a bus full of black seniors being bused to an early voting station that was stopped by the cops, pulled over, told they didn't have a correct license to drive people to the polling station, and they made them all get off and go home.
Get off the bus?
Yeah, they made them get off the bus and go home. So they're just like stopping buses of black voters and telling them they can't be going to the polls.
Oh my God.
You know, like it's not subtle, and it's very clear what's happening.
Right.
And in a lot of tight swing races where the Democrats really can't afford to lose a single seat in the Senate, or else they won't make the majority. And if the Republicans keep the Senate and the Democrats win Congress, you know, no laws get passed, right? That's just not going to happen. So the Democrats can make a lot of noise, and they can start an impeachment proceeding, and they can, you know, make the Mueller's special investigation very troublesome. They can't actually undo any of the damage being done. Right? And they can't reverse an executive order either if that President Trump just drops by himself.
Right.
So
but there are limits to what that can be. Right?
Yeah, there are. But, you know, he'll test the limits, and it takes a court challenge to push them back, and the court is stacked for the Republicans now. The Supreme Court upheld these voter ID laws now that they have...
Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah, now that they have a conservative majority, right? Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Anyways,
is this it, buddy?
This is pretty bad, man. This is what I'm saying. This is pretty brutal.
Holy shit.
Yeah. I want to say, too, that, like... This was the most mind-blowing thing, and I have to shout out Anthony McMahon for drawing my attention to this one. Yeah. Who's our longtime fact checker, hopped right back in the saddle with us.
He's so good, he was able to fact check this before we even made the fucking episode.
I know, right? There's this crazy thing happening in the U.S. right now. Also, this is future ball stuff. Future ball, that sport we all know and love, where we things happen
Richard,
in the future.
Not everybody came from the future. Okay.
Right. Sorry, I forgot that.
Play it cool. Okay?
That you non-mutants, as we call you in the future, don't know about these things. So, okay, get ready for a bit of a trip, Jamie.
Sure.
So, constitutional amendments in America. They're a big deal, as we know.
Yeah, it can't be changed, right?
Well, they can be changed. There's two ways you can make a constitutional amendment in America, and the first way is the way it's been done every single time there's ever been an amendment.
Right.
So you need 2/3 of Congress and 2/3 of the Senate to propose an amendment. Like Congress will be like, here's an amendment we want to do. 2/3 of Congress has to be like, let's send this to the Senate. Then 2/3 of the Senate has to be like, okay, let's send this amendment into the states. And then 3/4 of the states have to vote in favor of the amendment, and then the amendment passes. And that's how every single time it's happened. Those are high numbers. It's hard to do. It generally only happens in very specific situations. And then generally there's a bunch of constitutional amendments in a row, like they come in bursts, because the conditions that allow them to happen are rare. Right? You have to have so much united control over all of the branches in all the states, which is like how it's meant to be.
Sure.
Right?
But be pretty universal, right?
There's this weird other rule in the Constitution that says that you can do an amendment
if you find the golden snitch.
You can do an amendment if 2/3 of the states ask for a constitutional convention to be held. Right? So remember when I said that the Democrats had lost tons of states and state legislatures and governorships?
Yes.
So at this moment, the number of states you need to ask for a constitutional convention is 34. There's 27 Republican-held states that have already asked for a constitutional convention to make an amendment about making it in the Constitution that you can't spend it into the deficit, that you have to balance the budget. You can only make a budget that includes the amount of money that spends the amount of money that America takes in. You can't spend more, which is like very normal for a country.
Sure.
And they need, I'm counting in my head, they need 7 more states before it's like technically the correct number, and they have them. There's 7 Republican states that have not yet asked for this constitutional convention. So there could be a constitutional convention as early as 2020.
Right.
And at that point...
And that's the amendment they want to change.
No. So that lets them figure out what amendments they want to propose. And the crazy thing is, this rule was drafted in the 1700s, right after the American Revolution, and there's no precedent for what it means or what will happen at this convention. There's no precedent for what powers the convention has. There's no precedent for what kind of amendment they can propose. Once they propose it, it skips Congress and the Senate and goes straight to the state for voting. Right?
Shit.
Yeah. And so if the Democrats lose tons of states, They could just ram through it. They could ban abortion. They could do anything.
Right.
And the thing is, there's people who say, well, Congress and the Senate would have to set terms for what the Constitutional Convention's allowed to make amendments on. Like they could say, hey, if you ask for this to balance the budget, then you're not allowed to make an amendment banning abortion. You have to make an amendment about balancing the budget. But the thing is, the Constitutional Convention has only happened twice in America's history, both times in the 1700s, kind of after the country was being formed. And there's precedent that you could argue that both of those times, they just kind of played fast and loose with it. That they're not actually beholden to listen to, they can't listen, they don't have to listen to Congress or the Senate. They can do whatever the fuck they want. In fact, once in the 1700s, they even said, actually, this amendment doesn't require 3/4 of the states. It only requires 2/3 of the states to approve it, and then it's approved, and that's a rule,
Right?
And that's binding.
How many? Okay, is it the presidential term? Is that an amendment? For 4 years?
Yeah, that could be a constitutional.
Twice?
That was a constitutional amendment, I believe.
Right, so that could be changed as
well. That could be changed easily.
Right.
Like I said, banning abortion could be changed. They could do a lot of really fucked up shit. They could repeal the Voting Rights Act, which guarantees
black people don't vote.
That is what it was.
Yeah.
It was like it basically guaranteed that race wasn't going to be like a limiting factor for how you voted. And there was all this before voter suppression and voter ID laws, which are used now to control black people's votes and other people of color. There were other things like, in some place in the South, they'd like make you do a fucking literacy test before you voted because they were trying to stop black people who had lower rates of literacy from voting. There were some places where you just had to pay a huge, a fee that the white people could afford and the black people couldn't before you could vote, and shit like that.
Right.
That was made all illegal by the Voting Rights Act, and that could easily be undone.
Wow.
Anyway, the Constitutional Convention, it maybe is just like a weird nothingness.
Right.
But the pieces seem there are interest
But the reality
groups.
Is that it's kind of
There are conservative interest groups who have been working very focused and hard on getting this Constitutional Convention to be a reality, and they are closer than they've probably ever been. The pieces are all in place for it to happen, and this midterm could easily just give them all the cards they need to play it.
Good.
Yeah, cool.
Good, okay.
So keep an eye out for that. That's a dark alternate future that we could be facing very soon.
Perfect. I'm gonna need another 11 months off. After
Yeah, I know. I warned you, bruh.
Yeah, it is not a happy return.
No.
But hey, the news never is, right?
There is some interesting stuff happening too. Like there's some cool Democratic candidates. I mean, the Democrats are a bit of a fucking mess. Right. I have to confess this one, because a lot of the Democrat numbers look really good for Congress. They're surging in a lot of areas, and they're getting a lot of kind of center-right Republicans who were probably who didn't like Hillary Clinton and probably didn't really like Trump, but just kind of stayed sort of silent about it, or maybe voted for Trump hoping it wouldn't be that bad. Mm-hmm. He's pissed a lot of them off now. So a lot of suburban typical Republican voters are now going to vote Democrat. And in a lot of cases, the Democrats have found these kind of like more right-wing Democratic candidates. But there's a huge diversity in Democratic candidates. The Democratic Party now is so large and crazy, it doesn't really mean anything anymore. Like there are Democratic candidates in New Mexico who are pro Medicare for all, pro healthcare, universal healthcare, but then they're like super anti-immigrant, super closed border because they're in a border state.
Sure.
They're pro gun control.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There are Democrats who are super pro gun control in Maine who are like universal healthcare people. Mm-hmm. And then there's also some really exciting progressive leftist candidates too. Like you maybe have heard of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
The New York lady.
Yeah, that's right. She pulled off this huge upset. This kind of like old 10-term incumbent Democrat guy.
Yeah.
This is a district that almost always goes Democrat. So the real race was in the primary, who was going to be the nominee, and she beat him. And it's a total upset. And she's very, very progressive and leftist, and has kind of become the face of the kind of leftist wing of the party.
Yeah, I saw her walking with Bernie or something.
Yeah.
At least that's the image. Yeah. That's the image they sold me or whatever.
Yeah, and the hope for that is that she's talked a lot about when she gets elected, knock on wood. It's unlikely that she won't, but I'm going to knock on wood anyway because we live in hell. That she could create a progressive caucus inside the Democratic Party, which means it's like a group, like a voting block of leftist people inside the Democrats. Ideally, you get enough to hold the balance of power on a few things, and you refuse to vote on stuff unless it's pulled even farther to the left than most of the party wants it.
It's like the opposite of what Hillary Clinton did.
Yeah, that's right. Where she pulled everything into the center.
Yeah.
There is like the equivalent group in the Republicans. They're called the Freedom Caucus, and they're like the crazy assholes who refuse to support anything Obama does and blah, 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 blah. That was kind of like all held hostage by a group of about 30 Congress people, and she'd be interested in creating something on the other side, which honestly is maybe one of the only ways to pull the conversation far enough left. It's already happening, you know, like healthcare is the major issue this year. That's fucked up because American politics is really weird in this way where it's like no one's talking about climate change the way that they should be.
Right.
It's not like a national issue. The national issue right now is healthcare, gun control, and immigration.
Right.
It's like where you stand on those three things determines a lot about your headline platform issues.
Right.
And this, I actually think this is kind of funny, is apparently how there's been this big flip. And people are now really in support of Obamacare all across America, including in Republican states, because there was this like interesting effect that happened where when the Republicans tried to get rid of it, and you can listen to our Obamacare episode and the follow-up from our previous season for this, when they tried to get rid of it, people actually learned a lot about what it is, and now they're in support of it. Now because the misinformation got kind of corrected.
Right.
So, you know, 3 years ago, Hillary Clinton said that universal healthcare was never going to happen, and it was like a pipe dream. Right. And now it's like very commonly talked about. You know, it's becoming a mainstream political
idea. A bit silly that it's not already there.
I absolutely agree with you, but it gives if there's hope, it's that the conversation is actually shifting left as it shifts right. Also, you know, like the more extreme ideas, quote unquote, extreme ideas on each side, normal ideas for the rest of the world, extreme left for America, are becoming a part of the national conversation. You know, universal healthcare seemed like a crazy pipe dream 3 years ago when we were doing the presidential campaign. Now it's very common for everyone has to address it in some way. Everyone has to reckon with it because it's entering the mainstream, and that's hopeful.
Well, that's good. Hey,
yeah,
look, we found it.
Yeah,
a little shred of hope.
Yeah,
that's nice. But actually, even if I can expand that shred to a full piece, you know, the idea that a group of people who previously thought Obamacare was like, you know, horrible and voted and worked to get rid of it can now open their eyes the next day in a moment of sobriety and go, oh crap, this thing was actually better the way it was.
Yeah.
That feels to me like a massive step forward. If for no other reason than like I haven't heard anyone on the news say, I guess I was wrong in like forever.
It's a breath of fresh air. Yeah. I agree. I'm you know, one of the most depressing things is the idea that like all of our ability in our mainstream conversations, all of our ability to like take evidence and like change what we believe is eroding. It's all this like partisan ignorance machine.
Right.
On the right, let's be real here. This is the thing on the right. Like on the left, there's obviously passion and fire and partisanship, but there's a policy culture on the left. There's an evidence-based policy culture, and the disagreements between the left and the right nowadays are about the left saying like, look at what's happening. We have to do something about fucking climate change, and the people on the right just going like plugging their ears and screaming because it's politically against them making money for the people they're supposed to be making money for, and that means they have to make the average right-wing person think it's a bad idea.
Right. Do you think there's I think this sometimes. First of all, I'm a big fan of Tesla, but sometimes I think that like Elon Musk is such an inspirational guy that he makes people think that it's all figured out. You know what I mean? Like sometimes people are like, yeah, but Tesla, right? Yeah. And like, you know, electric cars and all this. Yeah. And they go like, oh yeah, it's all going to be fine. We worked it out. Climate change is fixed.
We should do an Elon Musk episode soon and talk about him more. I think he's been kind of revealing himself to be sort of a less inspirational guy in recent days.
Oh my God.
Like it's kind of one of those things where it's like, Elon, shut the fuck up. Just smile and make the cars. You know what I mean?
Totally.
But I do think that that's a concern. I hope that the recent IPCC report that's been making all these headlines about how we're definitely going to hit 1.5 degrees of warming by 2040 is waking people up a little bit to the urgency of what's happening. Mm-hmm. But I agree. That is a problem, I think. I think that I hope for mainstream people, for people who consider themselves reasonable in the center, on the left and the right, will realize that we actually are far past the point where small steps will help us, and we need to make very, very large steps if we're going to avoid pretty serious problems.
Right. Well, hopefully the Republicans have that in mind.
Yeah, and people really aren't talking very much about it. It's not making national headlines or anything in America about climate change, and that's fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have to do another episode on it. Maybe that's your and my job, Richard.
Yeah.
Maybe we.
This is the headline.
Yeah.
Here, call up the New York Times. I got a headline for you. Is it hot in here? Or is it just me?
Yeah, political moron and his goon friend.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Too real.
Oh man. Okay, so is that pretty much the midterms in a nutshell?
That's the sitch we're facing on November 6th. Keep an eye on if Congress flips, if the Senate flips.
Right.
And if how many states end up going Republican versus Democrat, because that's going to be the real big, the big question. And remember, the magic number is 34 for a constitutional convention. So if 34 states end up Republican, we could see a constitutional convention before President Trump's term is done.
And so, so just to summate. So the Congress is up for election, and they. That's actually possible, like that the Democrats could.
It's quite. It's a good chance.
That's reasonable
that they'll take back the House.
But the Senate they're just a bit disadvantaged with timing.
Yeah. Only a third of them are up for a re-election, and the vast majority are Democrats up for re-election, which is bad.
And the Senate seats are those 34 seats is what you're talking about.
Sorry, no. I was saying. There's 34 states needed for a constitutional convention, so keep an eye out for that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, great. We're back, everybody.
Hey!
We got a bunch of exciting stuff coming up this season. Let me tell you, we are a year older, a year wiser, and shit's gonna get real.
We've been storing our energy for a year to just unleash it upon the world.
That's right.
As always, you can reach us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, or by email. Explain it to Jamie on all of those platforms, or explain it to jamie@gmail.com. Let us know what you think of the app. Let us know if you have a topic that you want us to explore.
If you have friends that you think would like this, share it with them. We want to reach as many ears as we possibly can, and your recommendation goes a long way. So thank you very much for listening this far. Especially into this end of episode commercial. Until next time, I'm Jamie.
I'm Richard.
This has been Explain It to Jamie. Woo!